both sides of the Capitol and have so much appreciation for the organizations that have worked so hard to collaborate on this bill, really since 2015. And we see this growing support from a growing coalition. We had 17 key organizations assisting in this effort. We have more than 500 businesses endorsing the act. We're going to keep building support. You know, President Lyndon Johnson said that freedom is the right to share fully and equally in American society, the right to be treated in every part of our national life as a person equal in dignity and promise to all others. We are here at this moment when that is not the case in America. As the Human Rights Campaign has declared, we are in a state of emergency, characterized by expanding discrimination and increasing hate crimes. LGBTQ plus Americans, and especially trans youth, are experiencing life-threatening environments. Certainly, our LGBT plus community does not have the freedom to share equally and fully in every dimension of American society. Many live in fear that around the corner could be violence or bigotry or state-sanctioned hate directed at them just for who they are. And this isn't just about discrimination or hate crimes by individuals. State-sanctioned discrimination is spreading across our nation. The Human Rights Campaign has tracked more than 500 anti-LGBTQ plus bills introduced and 75 signed into law, sweeping through state legislatures just in this year, 2023. More than double last year's total, which was already the worst on record. Anti-LGBTQ plus bills aren't just words on paper. They deny life-saving medical care. They deny inclusive education. They deny access to spaces and facilities. This is the most significant contraction of American freedoms and equality in generations. We all go to work and school, we go home, we go shopping. No one should have to keep one's family hidden or pretend to be someone we're not to do those things and engage in American life. It is now the time that we have a National Equality Act. Along with our amazing Senate champions, and a special appreciation to Senators Tammy Baldwin and Cory Booker, who have worked so hard in taking this vision and this effort forward. We have an outstanding House team led by Congressman Mark Takano, and then we have the support of Democratic leadership in both chambers. We introduced the Equality Act Day to tell kids across the country who might feel threatened or scared about who they are and how others react to them, that you are not alone, and that you should have the opportunity to participate in every aspect in our national life. We introduced the Equality Act today to tell our transgender youth, we stand with you and we will do all we can to end the prejudice and the discrimination and the bullying, so you will have a full opportunity to thrive. The Equality Act adds sexual orientation and gender identity, the longstanding bans on discrimination in employment, education, housing, public accommodations such as restaurants and libraries, financial institutions, and jury duty. It sends the message, particularly the youth of this country, that there is a future for them where they can thrive and live their fullest life. Because, to paraphrase President Johnson, we need to ensure that every American finally shares fully and equally in American society, that all in our LGBTQ+ community are treated as persons equal in dignity, equal in promise to all others. It's my pleasure to turn the podium over to California Congressman Mark Takano, who has been an outstanding leader in this movement and a great partner in bringing this bill forward today. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Senator Merkley, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm Congressman Mark Takano, and I'd like to take a moment to thank my esteemed House colleagues and the activists that have joined us today. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, Congressional Equality Caucus co-chair Sharice Davids, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Human Rights Campaign President Kelly Robinson, and National Center for Transgender Equality Policy Director Olivia Hunt. And I see I've been joined by Chris Pappas, Lizzie Fletcher, Senator Booker, and Ranking Member Jerry Nadler. I also want to thank my dear friend David Cicilline, who is not here, for entrusting me with this legislation after his departure from Congress. David is a brilliant, stalwart leader for the LGBTQ community, and we are all indebted to his service and advocacy. So it's an honor to be introducing the Equality Act today, and I take the responsibility of this critical legislation seriously. And I know I stand here today not only because of the countless hours that advocates and legislators spent drafting this bill, but because of the pioneers upon whose shoulders I stand. The promise of democracy means a great deal to me personally because I have felt the sting of its denial. I am the child and grandchild of innocent Americans who were incarcerated in internment camps during World War II because of their Japanese ancestry, who faced intense anti-Asian discrimination before and after World War II. I grew up watching legislators in California host TV debates on whether gays and lesbians should be allowed to teach in public schools just a few years before I myself became a public school teacher. And when I ran my second campaign for Congress in the 1990s, I was publicly outed by my opponent and made the target of homophobic attacks. When I was elected in 2012, I became the first openly gay person of color to serve in Congress. Now, we've come a long way since then, and the progress towards equality that we've made is the result of battles that have been fought for the civil rights of our community over the course of decades. Yet today, we face a wave of backlash in response to that progress. As both a teacher and member of Congress, I've met with so many young people and families that are on the front lines of that fight. And while I'm the first openly gay person of color to have been elected to Congress, I'm hardly the first gay member to have served. Now, since I was a child, I've been in awe of Congresswoman, the late Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, a black woman and a lawyer whose participation in the 1974 impeachment proceedings deeply moved and inspired my own journey into public service. Congresswoman Jordan was a towering intellect, a tireless crusader, and she spent 20 years in a loving relationship with a woman during a time when being openly LGBTQ would have certainly cost her her career she had fought so hard to earn. Today, the National Archives recognizes her as the first LGBTQ woman in Congress. During a time when the Watergate scandal was shaking the nation, Congresswoman Jordan spoke with conviction that her faith in the Constitution was whole, complete, and total. Though the rising vitriol aimed at the LGBTQ community is evidence that we must not cease our struggle for a more perfect union, like Congresswoman Jordan, my faith in our Constitution and in this nation is also whole, complete, and total. It is my belief that all people are entitled to the fruits of democracy, equality, and justice for all. That idea of America, an imperfect country still full of promise, is worth fighting for, and that I stand as a living representative. But my faith in radical Republicans and in the extremist the Supreme Court is not whole, nor complete, nor total. And that is why we need the Equality Act. A comprehensive bill to eliminate the possibility of discrimination in 7 key areas of public life. The Equality Act would extend to the LGBT community the same civil rights that all other Americans enjoy. Under the leadership of Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, this bill passed twice through the House of Representatives. And now it is introduced today with the support of the entire Democratic caucus. Thank you for that, Majority Leader Schumer. This bill is simple. It provides for full personhood under the law. Across America, Republican-led legislatures are setting records for anti-LGBTQ legislation introduced and passed into law. And many of these bills target the most vulnerable members of the LGBTQ community. Young people who are afraid that their parents will reject them if they are out as LGBTQ. Not only are trans Americans being denied the most basic human dignities of being called by the right name or allowed to use the bathroom, they are being denied their own existence. These are needlessly mean, discriminatory bills, and their passage has spread a palpable sense of fear among LGBTQ Americans, a fear that a brief moment in the sun has given way to a dark night. Yet we must remember that we have seen and overcome darker times. We have gone from the riots of Stonewall to the celebration of Obergefell. We have come out of the closet and survived the scourge of HIV. And just last fall, this Congress, on a bipartisan basis, sent the Respect for Marriage Act to President Biden's desk. Unthinkable 10 years ago. We have fought and won the right to serve in the armed forces of this nation we love, and we fight on today to win full equality under the law. So these are harrowing times, but there is a light of hope on the horizon, and that hope is the Equality Act. We are filing this bill during Pride Month, a time of celebration, but also an opportunity to reflect a time when being out was nearly impossible, when our existence was universally criminalized. We cannot allow extremists in our country to once again normalize homophobia and attacks on LGBTQ people. We can't turn away from the discrimination that still exists for so many LGBTQ people today. We can't, and we won't, and we will continue as a community to persevere through these challenges. We will create a safer world for us to thrive. We will pass the Equality Act, and we will win. So thank you very much, and I want to welcome to the podium the senator that did so much to pass the Respect for Marriage Act and who has a bead on how we're going to get this Equality Act through the Senate, Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Congressman Takano, for your incredible leadership. I am proud to be joined here by my colleagues and organizations that are committed to fighting for LGBTQ+ equality. So across the country, as we speak, violence is on the rise against the LGBTQ+ community, and it's only intensifying right now. In state legislatures across America, nearly 500 pieces of legislation have been introduced that target and harm members of the LGBTQ+ community, particularly trans children. In the majority of states, LGBTQ+ Americans live without fully inclusive non-discrimination laws and can still face discrimination simply because of who they are, who they love, or what their family looks like. No one should be denied an apartment, a job, federal aid, or anything else just because of who they are. And that's why I'm so proud to join all of my colleagues today in introducing the Equality Act to ban discrimination against members of the LGBTQ+ community. The fight for LGBTQ+ rights has been long, but we have made unmistakable progress in the fight towards true equality. Just a decade ago, passing marriage equality and the Respect for Marriage Act with a dozen Republican senators on our side would have been unthinkable. And last year, we defied political gravity and passed the Respect for Marriage Act into law. like to remind folks that progress cannot be mistaken for victory. We need to get the Equality Act across the finish line. The Equality Act signifies the best of who we are as Americans. If we're going to celebrate the ideals of liberty and freedom, we must have comprehensive nationwide protections for LGBTQ+ Americans. And I look forward to working with my colleagues to create a future where all Americans have the freedom of full equality. And now I'd like to pass on the podium to Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries for his remarks.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin, and to Speaker Emerita Pelosi, Leader Schumer, to Whip Clark, all of my distinguished colleagues in the House and in the Senate, certainly to Senator Merkley and to Representative Takano for your leadership. It's an honor and a privilege to stand before you today as we express our full-throated support for the Equality Act. Every single member of the House Democratic Caucus standing behind this incredibly important piece of legislation. And the Equality Act is and will continue to be one of our top priorities legislatively. Until we get it over the finish line, we will not rest. Now, America is a great country, but we, of course, are an imperfect country. But the framers of the Constitution did set us on a course toward a more perfect union through a process that Barbara Jordan once described as court decision or amendment to the Constitution, litigation victories, and legislation, for us to continue that march toward a more perfect union. That is what the Equality Act is all about, pushing back against the discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community, choosing hopefulness over hatred. That is why the Equality Act is such an incredibly important piece of legislation that all Americans should be able to get behind, because it lifts up principles that are part of our DNA. The Equality Act is necessary to make sure that the principle of liberty and justice for all applies with equal force to the LGBTQ+ community. The Equality Act is necessary to make sure that the principle of equal protection under the law applies with the same force to the LGBTQ community as it is intended to apply to everyone else. The Equality Act is urgently necessary to make sure that members of the LGBTQ+ community can live free of discrimination and have the freedom to pursue the American dream in every single zip code, just like everyone else throughout the United States of America. We stand with the LGBTQ+ community today. We stand with the LGBTQ+ community tomorrow. We will stand with the LGBTQ+ community forever as it relates to the Equality Act. We'll continue to show up and speak up and stand up with you until the Equality Act is the law of the land. It is now my great honor to yield to a tremendous leader, a champion for the LGBTQ+ community, and a champion for the Constitution, civil rights, and our democracy, as well as a fellow Brooklynite, Leader Chuck Schumer.
It is good to have Brooklyn in the house. We have a few Brooklynites here. Anyway, it's great to be here. I want to thank Senator Merkley for his leadership on this issue, Senator Baldwin, Senator Booker, who have been outstanding leaders again, as well as Representative Takano and all of our House members. It's such a great thing that every single House member is a sponsor of the legislation. That's wonderful. So let me say, just last year, the Senate did what many considered impossible. We passed bipartisan legislation that provided protections for all married couples under federal law. They didn't think we could do it. It looked like over the summer we couldn't, but Tammy and Kirsten Sinema came to me, and we all decided, the three of us, that we're going to hold it till after November, foregoing what might be a small political advantage to get something done. And get it done we did. And while I was proud to lead the fight along with Senators Booker and Baldwin and Merkley and so many others, there's so much more to do. It is hard to believe in 2024 it is not illegal to discriminate against LGBTQ plus people. It's incredible. Marriage, thank God. But there's employment and health care and housing, and it's allowed. It's okay to some, not to us. And that's why we have a long way to go, a long way to go. We must pass the Equality Act. It would be transformational for new generations. It'll make sure that members of the LGBTQ plus community don't have to face discrimination that is not outlawed by the federal government. And states can do all kinds of junky things, as we have seen in state after state against LGBTQ and particularly trans people. Just awful. Now, passing this bill was personal to me. Guess what I did on Father's Day? I took a 3-month-old baby, Hank, the son of my daughter and her wife, on a nice stroll in the park. What a great Father's Day. There's Happy Prospect Park in Brooklyn. And I want my daughter and her wife, as well as everybody else, to not live in fear that their rights could be stripped away by a radical Supreme Court, that their rights are not as full as everybody else's, that one extreme MAGA judge or an out-of-state legislature, Lord knows what they could do. No one who identifies as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or any other label under the LGBTQ plus umbrella should fear losing their job, being turned away from a business, simply because they choose to live life fully and openly and love the one they love. On the contrary, they deserve peace of mind. Peace of mind, knowing their rights will be protected in this country. And we know that a majority of Americans support this. As some of you know, I was the first senator to march in the Gay Pride Parade in New York City. I'll be looking forward to it Sunday. And I have my bullhorn, and I keep saying that Dr. King said the arc of history is long, but it bends in the direction of justice. But as Dr. King's example showed, we have to fight for that justice to make it happen. Fight we will. Under this Democratic Senate, we will continue to fight to get the Equality Act across the finish line. Thank you. Now it's my honor to introduce one of my dearest friends. We are known for finishing each other's sentences. We've been hanging around so long. But a leader for equality for such a long time. A real beacon for this movement, and a great, great leader, and a great, great human being, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you, Chuck. What a joy, Mr. Leader, to hear you talk about Allison's baby and her wife, Allison and her wife's baby. It's such a joy to all of us who love Allison, who love you, love Iris and your whole family. Let me just commend my colleagues for all the work that was done on so many issues that relate to the LGBTQ plus community. But more important, we take pride in what we have done. But let us thank you for the mobilization that made our success possible. I want to salute the LGBTQ plus community for your patriotism, for making America more American by fighting for the rights of the community. And with the work that we all did together in the House and in the Senate for HIV/AIDS prevention, care, research, all the rest of it. But the mobilization that went into that, I think, made possible so many other victories. In the House, we passed in the Congress, we passed the hate crimes legislation. When we were passing it, people came to me as speaker and said, you could pass this in a minute if you took out trans. I said, no, we won't pass it in 100 years if we take out trans, because we're never taking out trans. And that was a number of years ago. And that's part of our challenge now. And that's what we did with your mobilization and our courage in the Congress. That we had the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Again, expanding freedom in our country. Thank you for your patriotism. Next, we were going to do ENDA, discrimination in the workplace. And then you all said, and others joined and said, why are we just confining it to employment? Why aren't we expanding it to total equality? Hence, the Equality Act, which opens up the civil rights law to expanding equality to the community in every area, as Leader Schumer mentioned, beyond one thing or another, but everything. Senator Merkley, I'll never forget when we stood together, your leadership coming out of the Senate, David Cicilline coming out of the House for the initial introduction of this legislation. Standing with you was John Lewis. John Lewis, who said to everyone, because there were those who were, shall we say, not as enthusiastic about opening up the Civil Rights Act, we must do it, it's long overdue. And he stood there at the launching of the Equality Act. This arc of history that the leader talked about, John Lewis wedded his life to it. So again, thank all of you for your outside mobilization to make our inside maneuvering successful for all of you, for our country. Thank you for your patriotism. Thank you for making America more American. Now let's get on with passing the Equality Act to do justice.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to say thank you to the extraordinary people that are around me and who have been here, our incredible House members and senators. These are, in my eyes, heroes of hope and instruments of love. I want to give a particular thanks to my extraordinary Senate leadership. I am so grateful for the work of Senator Merkley, and I am so grateful for the record-breaking, glass-ceiling, shattering, extraordinary leadership of Tammy Baldwin. I looked around me when we were all gathered here at our peak, and I felt the lack of Congressman Cicilline, who has been so extraordinary, vital in the movement since I have been in Congress towards the Equality Act, and another House member whose absence hurts my heart, and that's John Lewis. I had this unbelievable life experience to be able to sit as a colleague with your hero, shorter than me, but so much larger in stature. And I remember talking to him about this legislation, and he made it clear you cannot have freedom one when it's only freedom for some. We are a nation that is on a journey from Lexington and Concord to Appomattox. We are on a journey from Seneca Falls to Stonewall to Selma, a journey toward freedom. And we cannot be free until everyone is free. And so, for John Lewis, it was plain. A man that literally bled the soil of this nation red for freedom. He knew that his freedom was bound up in that of his brothers and his sisters. We have this nation right now that professes the ideal of liberty and justice for all, but where is the justice for all when you can be fired from your job in the majority of the states just because you are gay? Where is the justice for all where you can be denied a loan from a bank or precluded from public accommodations just because of who you are? This is an insult to our ideals. It is a continuing stain upon our pride as a country. This is not a cause just for the LGBTQ. It is the call of all Americans who believe in our ideals. And so I say now, echoing the words of our ancestors, our truth must go marching on until we take the dreams of America and make them the reality of America, until we take the ideals of America and make them the unflinching, unwavering truth of America for everyone. There is a song sung, the civil rights movement, by a great group called Sweet Honey and the Rock. It is named after a freedom fighter named Ella Baker. And the refrain is very simple, and it speaks to the truth of those in this room. It speaks to the truth of children who are not represented here today. It speaks to the collective anguish and agony of bullying, of violence, of threats and intimidation. We have work to do. And the song goes, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it's won. Thank you. I now bring up the great, extraordinary freedom fighter, truth teller, Representative Sharice Davids.
Okay, I don't know who put me after Senator Booker. We'll have that conversation later. Good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all of the folks in the room who have spent so many hours fighting for equality and doing that on behalf of the LGBTQ plus and Two-Spirit community. I really appreciate all of you. Also, happy Pride Month. So I'm Sharice Davids. I represent the Kansas 3rd Congressional District. I am the fighting third. That's right. And I wasn't expecting that kind of thank you guys. I needed it. I'm a little bit nervous for some reason. I think because this is such an important topic and, of course, very personal. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Congressional Equality Caucus, and in 2018, when I was elected, I got the chance to be part of this amazing, diverse group of people, and was one of the first 2 Native American women ever elected to Congress alongside my dear friend Deb Haaland. I'm the other one. And then I also got to be the first openly LGBTQ plus person to represent my state at the federal level. And we just heard from the senator about the inequalities that exist in various states. So while I can walk the halls of Congress as a representative from the Kansas 3rd and vote on the House floor on behalf of hundreds of thousands of people who live in Kansas and have put their trust in me to show up here every day as an adult in the room and someone who is really fighting to make sure that the people in my state are best represented, I can also be turned away from a restaurant, from hotel accommodations, from a dentist office. The list goes on and on. They can't fire me from this job, though, without going through quite a bit of trouble. But all of those things are so important, not just because of the impact on me personally, but because of what we've been hearing about. That this type of discrimination, while it is absolutely unacceptable and it's not right, it's allowed under the law. And until we get the Equality Act across the finish line, it will continue to be allowed and unacceptable. So we have a very important task in front of us. Let's just fix the allowed that's not acceptable and just make it not allowed and not acceptable. These don't feel like profound statements, but it is the #1 priority of the Equality Caucus. Thank you, Senator Baldwin. We love you. So I know that folks often look out from home at what's going on in DC and think that it's broken. Congress is broken, DC is broken, but just last year we did have 51 Republicans vote to enshrine marriage equality under federal law, and I think we should clap for that with the Respect for Marriage Act getting passed. Because it's a huge bipartisan win, but it also hopefully helps us see that we're not screaming into the ether. There is hope. There are reasons for us to continue to fight. And I know so many of the folks in this room know that. I really think that our continued effort, both the advocates, activists, and the legislators who continue to do this, push for the Equality Act, will truly save lives, both now and when we get this legislation passed. We have this duty to continue to send the message, particularly to our LGBTQ+ youth, that your existence is really important, that there are people who are here responsible for making this country a more just and right place to live, care about your existence, about your being seen, about your being heard, and about you being treated with all the respect that you deserve as a human. Because right now, we have too many of our young people who don't feel that. And that's the unacceptable thing. We have to send the message to our LGBTQ+ community, and particularly our youth, that you're important. And the Equality Act does that. And our consistent push to get this bill across the finish line will keep doing that until every single person in this country, whether you're part of the LGBTQ+ Two-Spirit community or not, knows that you have the right to be here and you have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. And we're going to keep that up. Thank you very much.
Olivia Hunt is joining us from the National Center for Transgender Equality.
Thank you so much, Senator. Also, thank you, Representative Davids, for acknowledging that you were a little bit nervous. Now I don't feel quite so bad being up here, also being a little bit nervous. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivia Hunt. For the past year and a half, I've had the honor to serve as the Policy Director at the National Center for Transgender Equality. In that time, we've seen nearly 750 pieces of anti-LGBTQIA+ legislation introduced in state houses across the country. More than 500 of those just since January of this year. And as we all know by now, most of them particularly target transgender and non-binary youth, with the most vicious attacks focusing on trans youth in particular. I had the opportunity earlier this year to visit the site of the Compton Cafeteria Uprising, the spot in San Francisco where for several weeks in 1966, trans people, primarily black trans women, rose up to protest against oppression by the city, oppression by the state, refusal by the state to acknowledge who they were and let them go about their lives, refusal to let them live their lives. And I was struck in that moment how far we'd come since 1866. And also struck by how far we haven't come, by how things have changed and how things haven't changed. No one's fundamental human rights should depend on which side of a state line they happen to find themselves. All Americans, including LGBTQIA+ Americans, deserve to live full and honest lives as part of our communities, lives free of violence and harassment and discrimination. In this environment that we live in right now, of hostile policy and even more hostile rhetoric, the protections afforded by the Equality Act are more vital than ever. Today's reintroduction and the overwhelming support for this act and its protections by both houses of Congress, by national and local advocacy organizations, by faith leaders, and by the American people all serve to reject, not just reject, to repudiate, refute, refuse to accept the harmful and dehumanizing attacks coming from anti-LGBTQIA politicians and media figures nationwide. The National Center for Transgender Equality is proud to support and to endorse the Equality Act. And now I have the pleasure to pass the podium to Kelly Robinson, President of the Human Rights Campaign.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. Yes. Could we do a little rally vibe here as well as a press conference? Okay. My name is Kelly Robinson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm proud to serve as president of the Human Rights Campaign. I'm even prouder to be here today alongside so many of the wonderful senators and representatives that have made today possible. Leader Schumer, Senators Merkley, Baldwin, Booker, Leader Jeffries, Representatives Pelosi, Takano, Pocan, everyone that's brought this to light. I also just want to celebrate the fact that we're having a moment here where there are so many LGBTQ+ members of Congress that we don't even have enough time to have them all speak. That's progress, y'all. That's progress. Yeah. I get these reminders every day that progress is not only possible, but it's happening. And right now in this moment is more critical than ever. Representative Davis gave us a happy Pride. I also want to say happy Juneteenth that we also celebrated this week. Yes. And it feels on purpose and in purpose that we're introducing the Equality Act on this connection of weeks. As a Black, queer woman and leader in this movement, I shouldn't have to determine if I'm being discriminated against because I'm Black, queer, or a woman. Discrimination is discrimination and should be illegal under the law. That's what the Equality Act is about. I'm also so thrilled to stand beside other Black queer leaders in this movement, like Melanie Willingham Jaggers from GLSEN, who's here with us today. That leadership matters. I just came over here from a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, and nothing will quite make you feel alive like sitting in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. But in that room, I wanted to say in no uncertain terms that lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and trans people, we exist. We are here. We have always been here, and we deserve the full rights and protections just like every other American. And in this moment, it is so unfortunate that the LGBTQ+ people of the United States of America, especially our trans siblings, are living in a state of emergency. This is not an exaggeration. This is not a dramatization. You've heard it already. More than 500 anti-LGBTQ+ bills, nearly half of them targeting the trans community, 80 introduced into law across this country. This is a crisis. It's a political crisis, it's a policy crisis, but it's a moral crisis for anyone watching. Because if we can so easily attack a member of this community, if we can so easily attack our trans people, our trans youth, then we have to understand that our fates are intertwined, and an attack on any of us could be an attack on all of us. Across the country, LGBTQ+ Americans are feeling fear right now. This rise in legislative assaults has been also matched with violent political rhetoric that has quite literally put a target on our backs. We're standing here today 7 years from the Pulse anniversary that took 49 lives from our community, and only 7 months from the Club Q shooting that took 5 members of our community. No one should be living in this sort of fear in the United States of America. That's why we've issued a guidebook to help LGBTQ Americans to stay safe, to navigate these new anti-LGBTQ+ laws across the country, to get the resources that they need to be safe for themselves and for their families and for their communities in all areas of their lives. You can find more of this at hrc.im/warning. And I'm saying all this to say that yes, this is a state of emergency, but what we're calling on Congress to do is to answer the state of emergency with a sense of urgency that can protect our people, all of our people. The new state laws have created a complicated patchwork of chaos for LGBTQ plus people to figure out all across this country. But what the Equality Act would do is make protections for the LGBTQ plus people consistent and explicit in every state across this country. Simply put, the Equality Act would give LGBTQ plus Americans peace of mind, a sense of security, a sense of consistency that we have the same laws and same rights no matter what state we find ourselves in. And I want to say this, it's been nearly a decade since this bill was first introduced. And in that time, LGBTQ plus members of the military have been able to serve openly and proudly. The marriage equality has become codified into federal law. More LGBTQ plus members of Congress have been elected than ever before, and champions of LGBTQ plus rights now lead both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, y'all. Yes. Yes. The American people know where they stand. They know that we together are greater than all the hate that we've been experiencing and seeing. They know that the hate that's in communities and neighborhoods right now is not indicative of the sentiment of the majority of us, the majority of our families and our needs. They know that this is the moment where everyone is called upon to do more, to fight together. Not just to protect the trans community, but to protect all of us and the very soul of our democracy. So now's the time, y'all. Now's the time for Congress to catch up with our country and pass the Equality Act for good. To end this state of emergency for good. And to build a nation that for once, for all of us, ensures that America lives up to her promise. In the spirit of what our ancestors fought for. In the spirit of not only freedom, but liberation. Now is our time. Thank you.
Powerful words from so many incredible advocates. When we first launched this bill in 2015, we were looking in the Johnson room, out over the top of the cameras at the Supreme Court, with those words carved above the doors, equal justice under law. Is too much for us to ask for what is carved above the Supreme Court as a core principle of our nation? I think not. We are going to continue in this fight. We're open to a few questions, and we have some very capable folks to answer them. Yes, right over here.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. Would you expect the Equality Act to be voted on the Senate floor? Would you expect to be
So I reflect back on when Ted Kennedy asked me to lead the fight for ENDA, and that year was 2009. It took us time to build the partnership with Republican colleagues to have that moment. And we had that moment, and we developed it in partnership with our groups outside of this building, groups like Human Rights Campaign that was so instrumental in that effort and then in the drafting of the Equality Act. So we're going to continue that dialogue with our leadership, with our Republican colleagues, with our powerful outside groups, advocates for justice, and that is the path through which we'll find that moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chris Game with Washington Blade. I'm wondering if you can share any color on whether and how the new iteration might differ from previous versions of the Equality Act, and perhaps address concerns that might be watered down to urban Republican support.
Well, we have not changed one word of the Equality Act from the time it passed the House the first time, the second time, and I fully intend to pass a full-strength, undiluted Equality Act into law as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I would ask why right now, why today is the moment that the party chose to reintroduce this act?
Did you say why today?
Why today? Why right now?
Are we introducing? Well, first, I was thinking about, as we were talking here about this being a Pride Month, which is a real part of the story, and how when we meet each other, we often say, how are you doing? And how difficult that question feels, because there's so much injustice that needs to be addressed. And maybe we should just greet each other this month with, may the Pride Force be with you. That would be the way to proceed. But really the timing is that this is a month that the nation is focused on equal rights, that our advocates are doing a lot of events around equal rights, so it seemed like the right moment to come together. Any other questions?
Go ahead.
Can you just explain a little bit more about how this would address Sunday state level bills that we're seeing, especially when it comes to children?
Well, the Equality Act does enter into matters of education, equal opportunity, and federal funding. We also say that federal funding, people who accept federal funding cannot discriminate. The most difficult areas of providing equality for every American right now are in the areas of public accommodations and in the education space. So, I think the specific ways in which we're seeing laws aimed at transgender kids and the families of transgender kids, the Equality Act would provide consistent and sort of universal application to all zip codes in the United States. Your basic rights, the rights of Americans, should not depend on who they are or the zip code they live in, and that's the basic premise of the Equality Act.
Another core element is looking at what's going on in state houses, what's really driving the anti-trans legislation that we're seeing. And it is a message of exclusion. It's pointing to trans people, saying particularly trans youth, you don't belong in your communities. You don't belong as part of this society that we live in. And the Equality Act would, in addition to all of its legal impact, also send a very strong message that we're not standing for that message of exclusion. We're not standing for any pointing out individuals and saying that they don't belong as part of the community, because that's fundamentally opposed to the American principles that have brought us all here today.
Well, y'all, we really appreciate you coming to basically join in this effort to build the momentum for the vision of equal justice, of equal treatment, and end to discrimination. We know we have two big fights. One is the fight to carve discrimination out of our laws. And that is a responsibility we carry so heavily and that the Equality Act is a response to. The other is to carve discrimination and hate out of our hearts. And we have a long ways to go on both dimensions in America. And when it comes to our trans children, their journey is difficult. They need an extra measure of love from all of us. In their path, in which they are often the most discriminated against, they're most bullied, can we reach out and let them know we love them and we stand with them and we will defend them. Thank you all very much for coming today.
Congratulations. Thank you, sir.